The year was 1914, and the world was on the brink of a cataclysm that would reshape the course of history. The air was thick with tension, and the streets of Europe buzzed with whispers of war. In the heart of Sarajevo, a city nestled in the Bosnian mountains, a young man named Gavrilo Princip was about to set off a chain of events that would plunge the world into chaos. Gavrilo was a member of the Black Hand, a secret society dedicated to the liberation of the South Slavs from Austro-Hungarian rule. He was determined, passionate, and willing to sacrifice everything for his cause. On the morning of June 28, 1914, Gavrilo and his comrades gathered in the shadows of the city, their hearts pounding with anticipation. They had a plan to assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. The Archduke's visit to Sarajevo was a symbol of Austro-Hungarian dominance, and the Black Hand saw it as an opportunity to strike a blow for their cause. As the Archduke's motorcade made its way through the streets, Gavrilo and his comrades positioned themselves along the route, each one ready to carry out the deadly mission. The first attempt failed. A bomb was thrown, but it missed its target, injuring several bystanders instead. The Archduke's car sped away, and the would-be assassins scattered into the crowd. But Gavrilo was not deterred. He knew that this was his chance, his moment to make history. As fate would have it, the Archduke's driver took a wrong turn, bringing the car to a halt just a few feet from where Gavrilo was standing. Without hesitation, Gavrilo stepped forward, drew his pistol, and fired 2 shots. The first struck the Archduke in the neck, and the second hit his wife, Sophie, in the abdomen. Within minutes, both were dead. The assassination sent shockwaves through Europe. Austria-Hungary, already a fragile empire, was thrown into turmoil. The Austrians were quick to blame Serbia, a small but fiercely independent nation that had long been a thorn in their side. They issued an ultimatum, demanding that Serbia take responsibility for the assassination and allow Austrian officials to investigate the crime on Serbian soil. Serbia, backed by its powerful ally Russia, refused to comply. The stage was set for a confrontation that would draw in the great powers of Europe. Alliances were invoked, armies were mobilized, and the continent teetered on the edge of war. In the weeks that followed, the situation escalated rapidly. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, and Russia, bound by treaty to protect its Slavic ally, began to mobilize its forces. Germany, Austria-Hungary's ally, saw this as a threat and declared war on Russia. France, allied with Russia, was drawn into the conflict, and soon, Germany found itself at war with both nations. The final spark came when Germany invaded Belgium, a neutral country, in an attempt to outflank the French army. This act of aggression brought Britain into the war, as it had pledged to protect Belgian neutrality. By early August 1914, the great powers of Europe were locked in a deadly struggle that would come to be known as the First World War. As the first shots were fired and the first soldiers marched off to battle, few could have imagined the scale of the carnage that was to come. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand had lit a fuse that would ignite a global conflict, claiming the lives of millions and reshaping the world in ways that no one could have foreseen. And so, the stage was set for a war unlike any other, a war that would be fought not just on the battlefields, but in the trenches, in the skies, and on the seas. A war that would test the limits of human endurance and change the course of history forever. But this was only the beginning. The world was about to be plunged into darkness, and the story of the First World War was just getting started. To be continued. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the spark, but the tinder had been laid long before. Europe in 1914 was a powder keg of alliances, rivalries, and imperial ambitions. The great powers Germany, Austria-Hungary, Russia, France, and Britain were locked in a delicate balance of power, but beneath the surface, tensions simmered. The march to war had begun, and it was a march that no one could stop. In the days following the assassination, the diplomatic wires between the capitals of Europe buzzed with frantic activity. Austria-Hungary, emboldened by Germany's promise of support, issued its ultimatum to Serbia. The demands were harsh, designed to be unacceptable. Serbia was to suppress all anti-Austrian propaganda, dismiss officials accused of promoting such propaganda, and allow Austrian officials to participate in the investigation of the assassination on Serbian soil. Serbia, though willing to make concessions, could not accept the full terms of the ultimatum. On July 25, 1914, Serbia's response was delivered to the Austrian ambassador in Belgrade. It was a carefully worded document, offering to comply with most of Austria's demands but stopping short of full capitulation. Austria-Hungary, however, was not interested in negotiation. On July 28, 1914, Austria declared war on Serbia. The declaration of war sent shockwaves through Europe. Russia, Serbia's ally, began to mobilize its vast army in support of the small Balkan nation. The Russian mobilization was a direct threat to Austria-Hungary and, by extension, to Germany. The German government, under pressure from its military leaders, issued an ultimatum to Russia: halt the mobilization or face war. When Russia refused, Germany declared war on Russia on August 1, 1914. But Germany's war plans did not stop at Russia. The German High Command, led by General Helmuth von Moltke, had long prepared for a two-front war against both Russia and France. The Schlieffen Plan, named after its architect, General Alfred von Schlieffen, called for a rapid invasion of France through neutral Belgium, followed by a swift defeat of the French army before turning east to deal with Russia. On August 3, 1914, Germany declared war on France. The next day, German troops crossed the border into Belgium, violating Belgian neutrality. This act of aggression brought Britain into the war. Britain, bound by treaty to protect Belgian neutrality, issued an ultimatum to Germany: withdraw from Belgium or face war. When Germany refused, Britain declared war on August 4, 1914. The dominoes had fallen, and the great powers of Europe were now at war. The conflict that had begun with the assassination of an archduke in a distant Balkan city had escalated into a global conflagration. The armies of Europe, millions strong, began to mobilize, and the first shots of the war were fired. In Germany, the mood was one of grim determination. The Kaiser, Wilhelm II, addressed his troops, proclaiming that they were embarking on a holy war to defend the fatherland. In France, the call to arms was met with a mixture of fear and resolve. The French army, still haunted by the memory of its defeat in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870–71, prepared to defend its soil against the German invaders. In Britain, the declaration of war was met with a sense of duty and inevitability. The British Expeditionary Force, a small but highly professional army, was dispatched to France to support its allies. In Russia, the mobilization of the army was a massive undertaking, as millions of men were called to arms from the vast expanse of the empire. As the armies of Europe marched to war, the people of the continent watched with a mixture of hope and dread. Many believed that the war would be over by Christmas, a quick and decisive conflict that would settle old scores and restore the balance of power. But few could have imagined the horrors that lay ahead. The first battles of the war were fought in Belgium and France. The German army, following the Schlieffen Plan, advanced rapidly through Belgium, encountering fierce resistance from the Belgian army and civilian population. The city of Liege, a key fortress on the German route, held out for over a week before falling to the invaders. The German advance continued, but it was slower and more costly than anticipated. In France, the French army launched its own offensive, known as Plan 17, into the Alsace-Lorraine region. The French soldiers, dressed in their distinctive blue coats and red trousers, advanced with courage and determination, but they were met with devastating fire from the German machine guns and artillery. The French offensive stalled, and the German advance continued. By the end of August 1914, the German army was within striking distance of Paris. The French government fled the capital, and the city prepared for a siege. But the French army, under the command of General Joseph Joffre, was not ready to give up. In a desperate gamble, Joffre ordered a counter-attack along the Marne River, east of Paris. The Battle of the Marne, fought from September 6 to September 12, 1914, was a turning point in the war. The French and British forces, fighting side by side, managed to halt the German advance and push the invaders back. The German army, exhausted and overextended, was forced to retreat to the Aisne River, where they dug in and prepared for a long and bloody stalemate. The war that had begun with such high hopes and grand plans had quickly descended into a brutal and grinding conflict. The armies of Europe, once confident of a quick victory, now faced the grim reality of trench warfare. The front lines stretched from the North Sea to the Swiss border, and the soldiers on both sides settled in for a long and bitter struggle. But the war was not confined to Europe. The conflict quickly spread to the colonies and the high seas, as the great powers sought to gain the upper hand. In Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, colonial troops were mobilized, and battles were fought on distant shores. The war had become a global conflict, and its impact would be felt around the world. As the first year of the war drew to a close, the people of Europe began to realize that this was not the short and glorious conflict they had been promised. The war was far from over, and the worst was yet to come. To be continued.